This
I,
conference will now be recorded.
I meant to push record, and now this is recording. The ones in red are agencies that are working in Loveland. So a little bit more about what happened most recently. We were awarded 9 vouchers from the Division of Housing using marijuana sales tax dollars to house 9 youth. Our housing authority has historically had a live, work, Loveland preference, and they wanted our city council to say that they would support using coordinated entry for these 9 vouchers so that they would feel comfortable going outside of their usual live, work, Loveland preference. City council, like our city council in Loveland, like city councils across the country, are concerned that if we build it, they will come. And so that's one of the issues that will need to be addressed in this strategic plan. They asked during that council session that this happened. So the reason we are doing a strategic plan is because it was requested by city council. So I would suggest listening to that city council meeting. Where you'll find it is under, I'm going to show you where to find it. So you can click on government and then city council, video archive, click on city council by date. The date is April 24th. So that's how you will find it. It's about, I think it's about an hour and 3/4 long. And it was the first presentation that night. So that's a little bit about how we got here. Our city council is supportive and not supportive. What I mean by that is we've presented every year, and you know they can't not be supportive about housing homeless residents because that would look bad. But they also we have several who don't believe that housing first is the way to go. They feel that they want people to have to bring something to the table, and so that will have to be addressed in the strategic plan. When you listen to that study session, you're going to hear all of those things said, so it won't be a surprise as to who is who feels what way. And then a little bit about the document itself, the information that was provided. I went through this on Friday and wrote down everything that I was thinking then, but that was so long ago, so I'm hoping to be able to recreate my thoughts on Friday. So part of it would be working with this office. Whoever does this plan in the end, we really want to work with you from this office. And part of that is, for example, most communities have a 24-hour shelter, and we don't have an intention of doing that. So if as you're going through here and you're looking at all systems of care and your suggestion is, well, you should build or find, remodel, maintain some 24-hour shelter, that's not really what we're going to want to look at. So what I'd like to do is take a much deeper dive in the future and say, these are the things that are in place, giving you much more information about them, both physically and politically. I put on here data because we discussed data in the RFP that was released, but honestly, we will probably do most of the demographic data for you, meaning we have somebody who started working here today who's going to do more of a point overtime count to give us some accurate information, an understanding of who has been SPDATed and who hasn't been SPDATed, taking a look at those scores so we can understand maybe the potential for permanent supportive housing, or rather the need for permanent supportive housing versus rapid rehousing. Our coordinated entry system, like most coordinated entry systems, is regional. So we have people in Larimer and Weld County. I showed a list of those partners, and so part of this would be having conversations with quite a few of the partners, not necessarily all of them, but quite a few of them, either in person or on the phone. But meeting with them, I would say I would hope for at least half to have physical meetings. And then one of our city council members has been donating money to the In-Between in Longmont, and he really likes that program. So taking a look at what it is they provide, how they provide it, and what that could mean for Loveland. That same council member doesn't know, I don't believe, that Longmont also, or rather Boulder County also has coordinated entry, and how that fits in with people who are actually participating in the In-Betweens program. We really want an implementation program, stuff that can happen right away, and looking at what we would want to do over the next 3 to 5 years. Looking at best practices from other communities. There have been communities clearly across the country that have said that they've ended veteran homelessness or reached functional zero, and a few that have said, like Bergen County, New Jersey, saying that they've ended homelessness or reached functional zero with all populations. And then finally, at the end would be a city council meeting. It's going to be very important to provide this to city council and then make a presentation to city council, so that we can actually have a conversation around, are you willing? One of the things that our Loveland City Council did last year was they dedicated 1.25% of all sales tax revenue to an affordable housing fund. So they have been actively and generously supporting housing for Habitat for 20 years, and our Loveland Housing Authority for probably 10, and mostly in the form of fee waivers, but sometimes it's millions and millions of dollars each year for gap funding for LIHTC projects. Some of what I would like to have in here, but I don't know if it's possible. There's always the data across the country of the actual cost of homelessness. And that's something that I've engaged in off and on for a few years, trying to say, okay, locally, what is homelessness costing our emergency room, law enforcement, the jail, even looking at some of the service providers, our day centers. What is the actual cost of homelessness? Not what is the average cost of homelessness for a city of this size, but seeing if we can come up with some actual numbers. And then another would be street outreach. I know that street outreach has to be a part of any robust system, but we don't have it on our radar right now because we don't have the resources to do that. But looking at it, if at some point down the road, if street outreach, if we're able to do street outreach, maybe a little bit of information there. So the actual cost in street outreach might be more of a wish list than a must-have. And then the last part would be looking at funding. We know that the using marijuana sales tax dollars has been available for about a year now, I believe it is, and looking at if we have any potential funding sources for some of this. So we looked at what we could see from the Division of Housing. They released the RFP for land. I think it was about a year ago, and we obviously we didn't apply for any of that. Looking at continuum of care dollars, I put the state access to resources and training legislation up there primarily because one of the sponsors of that was Representative McKean, who is a Loveland resident. And then the amount of money that the Division of Housing well, the Division of Housing has been putting money into vouchers as well, and so I put a maximum amount there. And then the City of Loveland also did, we don't have home dollars at this point, so that's also a possibility. So I think that there's some resources out there as well that could be tapped into, and having a better understanding of that could be quite useful. One of the line items in the strategic plan is realigning current funding resources. One of the things that the City of Loveland just did was we took our Community Development Block Grant Public Service money, and historically we had just added that to the pool of funding we have available for services, but the commission that allocates that funding said, okay, let's start taking another look at homelessness, and provided a grant to an organization to do a rapid rehousing program. So we're starting to get to a point where we will look at realigning some of those funding sources, but having some input on that would also be helpful. I'm just going to look through my notes. That might be all I wanted to say in terms of the history. Yeah, that's all I have in terms of the history and where we are now. I'd like to open it up for questions and a conversation.
Good morning, Allison. This is Gary Sanford with the Burns Center. My question is, are you looking for a scope of work that's specific to the City of Loveland, or is this more of a countywide or regional product that you're envisioning?
That's a really good question. Sorry, I haven't gone into that very much. So, in a way, both. So, politically, this is a City of Loveland plan. Realistically, it's a regional plan. So the Fort Collins Housing Authority, also known as now known as Housing Catalyst, built a 60-unit permanent supportive housing project on the south end of Fort Collins. And for those of you who don't know, it's about, from here, it's probably a 10-15 minute drive to get to that housing. It's about probably 10 miles. They started out housing people from Fort Collins, and now the housing, 100% of the house, well, maybe not 100%, the housing is run through our coordinated entry system. So people let me see if I can get to that. So they have about 20 units dedicated to veterans, and they've been incredibly helpful in producing some of these veteran numbers. They're working on their second project, which initially I don't know that they'll run it through coordinated entry, but they might. In Greeley, the Guadalupe House was not run through coordinated entry, but I'm hoping that does. And Loveland has no permanent supportive housing. So I feel that Loveland needs to be a partner in this, not only because we need to be a partner, but because we have people who are a part of the coordinated entry system who, quite frankly, don't want to leave Loveland because this is their home. So part of it would be looking at the resources that we have available, which of those resources are run through coordinated entry, what that means to Loveland, and what it means to the entire system. So some of the partner agencies will be from different areas. The other thing is that we had a meeting with the Loveland Housing Authority and Housing Catalyst, and Sam, the director of the Loveland Housing Authority, said, since you guys are experts in the services piece of it, maybe we build it and run it, and you provide the services. So there also exists that possibility, because they said yes, they would do that. So in that regard, it'll absolutely be a regional plan.
Okay. Thanks, Allison.
Allison, my name is Mike. You talked a little bit about the range of viewpoints on the council. Do you have a sense of the view in the community, a sense of how much community members see this as an issue they want to focus on, or do they reflect some of that same division in the council?
I would say that the council probably reflects the community. So I would say you've got a lot of people who want to do something, and a lot of people who want people to just go get a job. They see, obviously, the visible homeless, people downtown. We have talked about the need to do community outreach. So I guess what I would say about that is it would be great to have, as part of the implementation, we know that there needs to be community engagement. We have people to provide community engagement, and we actually have a couple of means to do that. So we have some leadership that can help with that. So I'm glad you asked that question, because I do think that talking about community engagement could be an important piece of this, because no, not everybody's going to be on board.
Hi, this is Megan Curtiff-Schatz with Focus Strategies. Thank you. This is an incredibly helpful meeting so far to really understand what you're looking for and what you're trying to accomplish. My question is actually about budget, and I'm wondering if that's sort of the budget or budget range you're looking at is something that you can share, mostly because it helps give us a sense of the scale that you're really looking for in terms of a planning process.
Yeah, I wish I knew that. I've never done this before, to be quite honest with you. And so I don't know that I can accurately answer that. I wish I could, because I think that would be very helpful. You know, all of us, when City Council, here's my gut reaction to that. When City Council said, we want a strategic plan, I very sarcastically said in my head, that's great. We'll have a plan that will tell you everything that I've been telling you for a year, and it's going to cost at least $60,000. Nicely done, Council. So I honestly don't know. That was just what popped into my head. I have no idea what this is going to cost. So let me tell you a little bit about what I would see as the setup. So one of the questions is, what is the range for the budget, and is 6-month period realistic? I also don't know that. I am not attached to 6 months. I certainly don't want it to be a year, but I'm not attached to six months. So how I would see this going is to start with somebody coming here or finding a place to meet where we could talk for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, so I could give you the lay of the land. Really take a deep dive into some of this, what we have, what we don't have, attitudes, people to meet. And then if I look at this list of partners, the ones that I think would be important to have a conversation with would be three-quarters of the ones in red at least, and United Way of Weld County, Outreach Fort Collins, Housing Catalyst, Homeward 2020, no, not Homeward 2020, Homeless Gear, Catholic Charities. I think that having those meetings in person might be of the most benefit, because I think you would get more out of it. And we could also narrow this list down, but you can see the number of partners on there. Obviously, doing research about other communities could be done outside of this. City Council preparation and meeting, I would say 10 hours at most. That would be a lot. Possibly attending joint meetings like our continuum of care meetings. Maybe coming to our Project Homeless Connect event in October would be a good way to make some connections there. And then possibly having a couple of one-on-one conversations with city council members, of which there are 9. We have, I think we have a majority willing to jump in and take a chance, 5 of 9. But I'm always kind of hooked on 9 of 9. I really want some buy-in from the naysayers. Does that help at all, Megan?
That helps a lot. Thank you. That gives me a really good sense. So follow-up question that I have, if that's all right.
Yes.
Thank you. Is so we are based on the West Coast. We're a national consulting firm. We exclusively work on homelessness. And one of the things we've been doing increasingly in the last few years is video conferences with a variety of people in a variety of forms, including, for example, one-on-ones with city council members, mayors, and other elected officials, because it works really well in their schedule and it cuts down on cost a lot because travel time and so on. So if we provide the technology, is that something that you would be open to, or is the list of things that you described happening in person really a requirement in your case?
No, I think you could do video. I think you could do video. I might, yeah, absolutely you could do video. Obviously a city council meeting would be in person.
Sure.
I would say no for one-on-one with city council, but I don't know. Well, I have 2 city council members in mind, possibly 3, where you could do a video as well. So yeah, that can work.
Great, thanks so much.
Hi, Allison. This is Katie Simons. Thank you for answering that question that I had written into the chat box. I think if you can hear me, I've now figured out how to unmute myself. As a follow-up, and I don't know, again, if this is something that you can answer, but I'm just curious where the money is coming from to pay for this effort, if that's something that you're able to talk about. Is it City Council who's put the money on the table? And I know you've said you can't really specify a specific amount, but are they willing to be open to seeing what comes in with the contract proposals and then say how much is available for this effort, or is there sort of a ballpark that you've been?
So I already took care of all of that. We have this fund for housing, and we went to City Council and we added to actually the ordinance that we could use professional services from this fund. So all of that has been taken care of. In fact, I'm not going to tell City Council what it costs. At this point, they said, do this, here's where the money will come from. If they ask, I'll tell them, but I'm not going to go back to them and say, this is how much it costs. And we have the money, and it's sitting there. So I have no concern about any of that, because I don't think they're going to ask. Does that answer that, Katie?
It does, yes. Thank you.
I think that the question about video conferencing, I mean, one of the things that we could do is have people come to, if they don't have the ability to do it at their various offices, we could have video conferencing setup here. So it would be a question of whether or not they would be willing to travel. A lot of these agencies, well, some of the local agencies, I'm kind of just looking at the ones in red, they are funded or have been funded through City of Loveland grant money. So they really are our partners, and I think that they would be willing to minimally come here. Loveland is not that big, so I don't know that it would be a burden for them to come here to talk via video.
Hi, Allison. It's Karen Capricioso with Intersector Partners.
Hi, Karen.
And hi there. I wondered in the list that you gave of folks to meet with, one of the things that I was wondering is whether you have any desire for the consultants on this planning process to meet with people experiencing homelessness in the community, or if you feel like you have a good understanding of needs. Okay.
Absolutely, you should. Like, we'll just go hang out at the library, see what happens, or go to the community kitchen. No, you really should. When we first started doing coordinated entry in February of 2016, we didn't have a system in place physically in Loveland to meet people. So I just made some posters and put them around town with my phone number. And people would call, and so our office became a place where people experiencing homeless would come to hang out, store their stuff. Right now I have some comic books. So it's become less and less of that, but so it might be needed to go to the community kitchen for lunch, or seriously go hang out at the library and see if we could find people to talk. There are also a couple of people that I personally helped get housing, so I think that they would be willing to talk as well about their experience. One woman who got housing a couple months ago, and she was homeless off and on for 35 years. So her lived experience would be very beneficial to hear, and I think she would be willing to come to the office to have these conversations with you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks for asking that, Karen. I know there's a lot of, I barely had any coffee, so I know that there's going to be a lot of stuff that I'm just not thinking of. I'm super excited about this. I mean, I can't begin to tell you how much I think that I'm hoping that this is the breakthrough that's needed here. I don't believe that we have, Homeward 2020 did a 10-year plan 8 years ago. And I haven't looked at that plan for a lot of years, but I believe that plan really focuses on the need of business and community leaders to step up and to be able to make a difference here and to really provide that kind of leadership. Weld County United Way completed Weld's Way Home, and their plan, www.weldswayhome.org, is quite robust. This was completed by a woman named Melanie Falvo, who's I believe the chair of the Balance of State as well. And it's an incredible plan. So it definitely takes everything that Fort Collins did in 8 years ago and made quite a robust plan. So reviewing what they have, and I think really aligning our messaging is going to be important as well, because we are truly working on a community-wide voice for this and a community-wide response. So the next deadline would be any questions that you have as you're digging into this. I believe it's the 30th. Yeah, deadline for written questions is the 30th, and then I'll answer those right away.
Allison, I did have one other question. This is Katie Simons again.
Yep.
Just wondering, will your office then be the office that is responsible for carrying out the strategic plan? Do you have a sense of sort of where it will live, or who will be responsible then for implementing it? Is it going to be a community-wide effort, or who do you see as the person or the entity spearheading it?
So I'm going to pretend I know how this is all going to turn out for a minute, even though, of course, I don't. But I would say that given the way that homeless services are going across the country, we're going to find that there's a need for permanent supportive housing, given our numbers. I went to council on April 11th of 2017 with some students from a local high school, and at that time asked for a parcel of land to be given to me. It's across the street from our police and courts building. It's plenty large, and I got a verbal, yeah, I don't see why not, which doesn't really mean anything. But if in the end the answer is yes, you need permanent supportive housing, we would recommend, a building of X number of units. Maybe part of it could be if the city has some land that they could offer, then that would reduce the cost by, that kind of thing. Or another thing that I did at that time was I said to somebody from the Division of Housing, is there any reason why we couldn't, if the RFP for the $750,000 comes around again, that we couldn't apply for money to buy the housing and then have the city make a donation to the build? And she, because it's kind of moving money. And she said, yeah, I think you could probably do that. So the city will have a part in some of this, both if they're willing to give up the land, if they're willing to have the land be purchased and then make a donation. In terms of accessing this housing fund for the cost of backfilled fee waivers and waiving the rest of the waivers. In terms of providing some support politically, having a voice from our elected officials. So what we won't do is build something and run it. We could help build it and give it away. So having an understanding of the viewpoint, especially of some key partners, will be important. So the ones that are managing shelter, would they be willing to, one of our thoughts a couple of years ago is if we have, and Katie, I'm sure you remember this, if we have some housing that we can offer, would service providers be willing to step up and say, these are my 5 units, so running through coordinated entry, I have 5 people, that I will continue to provide services for. We don't have, I know that the Division of Housing, or the state rather, would really hope that mental health service providers would step up to take the lead on the service portion of permanent supportive housing. We may or may not have that available, but having that conversation with our local group, Summit Stone Health Partners, would be a part of this. If Loveland builds this, what would it cost to provide the non-Medicaid hours to have somebody on site? And then what are the other costs of having, overnight, 24/7 somebody on site for security and like that. We also, on April 11th, 2017, the reason that the students were here is because Geometry and Construction is a program. If you haven't heard of it, it's a combination of building and math. And it was started at Loveland High School about 12 years ago and has since been replicated in over 400 schools across the country. Our local GIC program historically has built homes for Habitat. So they would build a 1,200 square foot home in 2 pieces in their parking lot, and then Habitat would write them a check for $12,000. They would have other donations and other fundraising that they would do, and then the house would be moved to a lot. So you could actually go see some of those homes, or I could send some pictures of some of those homes. I asked if they would be willing to do much smaller homes, and they said absolutely. As a matter of fact, if you Google 9 News Geometry and Construction Loveland, they were on the news like a month or so ago. And you can see what it is that they have in mind. So on this land that we'd asked the city for, we could, there's the idea of building permanent supportive housing, having obviously like an area that would be slightly divided with amenities, and then putting these smaller homes on that land as well. So there could be 2 types of housing. The address of our police and courts building is 810 East 10th Street. And just to the north of it, if you look on Google Earth, is this plot of land. There's also land directly east. Part of it belongs to the county and part of it belongs to the city. Any more questions? Thank you, everybody. I'll just look for questions on the 30th. And I really appreciate your willing to take a look at this.
Great. Thanks, Allison.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Thank
you.
you.
Uh-huh.
All right. Have a great week.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.